What's up, guys? This is Acidic Roots. Wanted to talk about a few things. So, I've noticed something particularly pertaining to the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, obviously, for people who are loaded with money, this is really not that much of a thing, but it's just becoming very, I just feel like the concept of supply and demand. I think I stepped on a cricket. I think the concept of supply and demand these days is getting rather atrocious for this machine. And so that whole thing is we're trying to sell Nintendo Entertainment Systems for 60, 70 bucks. Try getting a top loader Nintendo system, the one that looks like a Super Nintendo, and you're gonna be asking for like a good $100 some odd. So it's not so much that the amount of money is a problem. It's just the fact that, considering what's happened, we're really trying to make this sort of thing like a collector's item. And I think in some cases the collectors paying more attention to it being a collector's item more so than an entertainment item is just causing it to be, it's just getting out of control. When I did the Nintendo Classic Edition hunt videos back in January, the whole thing was it was a major disappointment for me to not be able to own those games. Now, Nintendo fucked around, and just towards the end of June, right as year 3 was getting ready to happen for me, they said, well, there's going to be a Super Nintendo Classic Edition. Now, the whole thing, here's what I have to say about that. I basically can tell you that I don't think the Super Nintendo one is going to fly off the shelves as much as the Nintendo one, even if it is a little bit more expensive, just because the Super Nintendo just doesn't have as good a place in the average folks' house as much as the Nintendo one does. And I see this as a disappointment, but then the whole thing is, the main thing I'm just trying to get to is just getting a fucking Nintendo in my home. And, just paying attention to it, all the schematics. You've got the clumsiness of the virtual console. You got the tactlessness of trying to get a Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, supposing you get the regular one, the one that came out in 1985, whole thing is you have to worry about the overheating problem. So don't go to work with the system on. That's the whole thing. Don't go to a friend's house and leave yourself on stage 6. You can't do that. So that's kind of the problem right there. And then the top loader is just more expensive, and that's just because everyone wants it. So we're just left with quite the vast conundrum, which I feel like, I wouldn't have expected this from Nintendo, but the whole thing is I just feel like this clumsiness is just, more trouble than it needs to be worth. And then you add in the game factor. Games like Legend of Zelda, you can't really play that much because the battery that was packed into the cartridge back in 1987 has died. Which it probably started dying, about 8-7 years ago, but that just happened to be the thing. So then you have to sit there and find someone who's capable of installing a battery, or do it yourself, whichever you feel like doing. Which I don't really know if Metroid and Castlevania have the same feature, but just an extra little thing. I mean, really, the only other thing to do is just get like an Xtron or whatever those shits are called. A new, the things that let you play the Sega Genesis and the Nintendo on the same machine. So I forget what those are called, but they have machines that have all the machines in one package. But I don't know what's up. I mean, that's really the whole thing, is I can't really tell what's necessarily going on with this original Nintendo, just because the demand is just too fucking high for it. And the whole problem with it is, I don't even feel like the demand is that high. That's the whole problem. I think people just want it because everyone else wants it. It's not actually that people are saying, you know, I'm going to beat Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, today. It's just more like, hey, you know, I want this, and then I'm going to go, you know what I mean? Like, there's always someone who buys something before someone who actually wants it and is going to play it. And that the person who actually would have a more endearing experience with it misses out due to the folks who are just, you know, they just want it due to the hype. Now, obviously, I understand, like, when I get a Nintendo, whole thing is that I'm not saying I'm going to play it every single day, but I'm definitely going to play Contra. That is a game. I want to play Contra. I want to play Duck Hunt. I want to play Pac-Man. I want to play Donkey Kong. I want to play Super Mario Brothers. I kind of want to play River City Ransom. You know, just some of these type games. I mean, really, there's enough of them to go around. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. I mean, there was definitely a good little horde of games out there that, you know, still stand strong, you know, almost 30 years later. And that's just kind of the problem. Punch-Out, that's another one. And I want the one with, you know, Mike Tyson in there. That's definitely the one to get. But, yeah, I mean, that's just food for thought, you know. It's becoming somewhat ridiculous because the concept of trying to get a hold of some of these machines is just, you know, getting out of balance. I mean, that's the whole thing is, you know, I've watched some videos like a Boogie and everything, and they're just talking about scalpers who sit there and are doing the same thing. I mean, once someone gets tired of the machine, they just go and sell it, and then the people pick it up, and then they raise the price 15%, and that keeps happening. So, I mean, the whole thing is you basically, you basically do have to, you know, getting a Nintendo and at least 10 games is going to run you $250, $300. Now, when in reality, I remember having a Nintendo, and the whole thing was I remember back in the day when Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt was worth 50 cents or $1. You know, you tried to sell that shit to someone, get a quarter for it, they'd turn around and sell it for $1.50 because everyone had the game. I mean, back then, before Minecraft, before Angry Birds and all these different games, Super Mario Bros. Was the best-selling game of all time. And now that the resale value has gone up, it's like, hey, you know, now you're talking $15 just for that, you know, a game that everyone and their uncle has played. So it's, I don't know what to say. I mean, it just makes me wonder what Nintendo's stance is on this. They tried to do it, but the Nintendo Classic Edition was just so clumsily involved. And the only other thing to do is just to buy that. But I'm just at the point where it's just like, fuck it, you know. I'd rather just have the game and just do it that way. But these are just extra things, you know. That's something I've come to notice.